Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Okay. So, we are continuing our NCERT series. So far, we have already completed all the NCERT history textbooks from class 6 onwards to class 11. Okay. So, this is actually the 12th standard textbook that we are continuing. This is lecture 3 out of 6. We have already completed 2 lectures yesterday and day before yesterday. So by next Tuesday, this textbook will also be completed, thereby completing the entire history textbooks for from the NCERT portions for your UPSC Civil Service exam. Okay. Good evening, Satyendra. Good evening, Rajaram. Alright, so let's continue. Before we begin this session, as usual, let me just talk to you about Unacademy. Unacademy is India's largest learning platform, which offers you a wide variety of contents, daily live classes where you can chat with your educator, clear your doubts, etc., live tests and quizzes which will help you to evaluate your own preparation and be better prepared during the time of examination, structured courses which will completely cover the syllabus for the particular examination, and finally unlimited access to all our materials which are learned for your based on your subscription. Okay, so in order to get all these things, first thing to do is download the Unacademy learning app. Please download the same from Google Play and App Store and create an account. I am Madhav Sankar R Warrier and this is my Telegram channel. Please follow this channel to get my class notes, PDFs, etc. Also, kindly follow me at unacademy.com/@MSRW so that whenever I schedule a lesson in Unacademy app also, you will get notified. Okay. Now, Unacademy brings you all the top educators from all over the country and you can use their expertise in bettering your preparations. So, a typical UPSC CSE package brought to you by Unacademy would look something like this. You will have all the basic syllabus-wise subjects such as polity, history, current affairs, so and so. You will also be getting optional courses. Some of the optional courses are extremely hard to get in your locality. But you can use Unacademy for your preparation for those optionals as well. So the basic package, which is known as the plus package, which will include everything that I have so far mentioned, is given to you in varying time frames, all the way from 1 month to 3 years. So you can choose one of these packages according to your needs and subscribe to it. A typical 1-year package will cost you 49,500 rupees. But again, using my code MSRW1, you can get 10% discount. Okay, so the other kind of package for UPSC students is the iconic package. Here, the benefit is that along with all the plus benefits, you will also be getting a personal coach who is like a personal trainer who, one-to-one kind of session with an educator, daily mains answer writing practice, study planner sessions, personalized feedback sessions, etc. Here also there are 3 packages available. So a 1-year package will cost you 69,500. Again, 10% discount is applicable on using my code MSRW1. Finally, regarding the optional packages, this is what is available. A 1-year package here is 27,500. Again, 10% discount is applicable upon using the code MSRW1. Please remember that for any subscription that is greater than or equal to 6 months of time, you can pay the fees using no-cost EMI facility. Equated monthly installment facility can be availed for paying the fees of any subscription that is greater than or equal to 6 months in time. Okay, so that is regarding the subscription packages. Some important announcements also coming up. Unacademy is actually beginning something known as Unacademy Combat starting from December 6th, 11 a.m. This is like an all India quiz competition. Okay, something like that. So it will be sessions of 45 minutes, 60 questions, 13 combats will be there, which will be divided into 6 sessions, and the scoring will be based on the relative scoring technique, and it will be a fortnightly contest, which means after 15 days. So first one in December 6th and then will end in December 20, and the toppers will get the following prizes. The All India first rank will get Apple MacBook Air, second will get Apple iPad Mini, third Apple AirPod, and the top 100 rankers would secure rupees 1,000 Amazon vouchers. So very attractive prices are in your way. So please do enroll for the Unacademy Combat via the Unacademy website or Unacademy app. Okay, so please download the app and enroll for the same immediately. Unacademy also brings you a lot of free stuffs. Okay, free classes and sessions are available. So for example, some of my sessions as shown here are completely free. You can watch this, but you have to unlock them first. In order to unlock these sessions, you can use an educator code. For example, my code MSRW1. There is no payment or anything. All these are free, but to unlock them, you have to use an educator code. Okay, so please do look into that as well. Good evening, Supriya. Good evening, Seema. Hello, Himblocks. Okay, so let's continue with our classes now. Themes in Indian History, Part 3, Lecture 3 out of 6. I hope I am audible and the slides are all visible. Okay, so theme 11, Colonial Cities, Urbanization, Planning and Architecture. So this is our topic for the day. Okay, theme 11 from your Part 3 NCERT 12th Standard History textbook. So introduction. So this chapter basically deals with urbanization in India, also deals with how the colonial government changed the traditional methodologies of India, also deals with how the architectural styles in India changed over the 18th century. Okay, so let's look at, this is what we are going to look into in this session. Urbanization in the colonial India, how it impacted the traditional society, what were the changes that happened while urbanization went on. We are looking into urbanization in the context of three particular cities, Madras, Calcutta and Bombay. These three were the three presidencies of British over the 19th and 20th century. Okay, so we are looking at urbanization especially in these three cities. Also, we have to understand that all these three were originally fishing and weaving villages. Okay, before the arrival of British, before colonization happened, one thing common to all these three cities is that all of them were actually fishing centers, all of them were actually weaving villages, and they were also centers for economic trade and activities. Alright, why? Because all of them were port cities. They had harbors, natural harbors, they had access to the sea. So most of the sailors and traders and merchants arrived at India and took goods out of India using these three ports. Okay, so this is the history of these three areas, but we will see that once colonization happened, these three cities will have a phase shift. Okay, so East India Company agents settled in Madras first in 1639, then in Calcutta in 1690, and finally Bombay was given to the company by British King in 1661. Okay, Bombay was actually handed over to the East India Company did not have to conquer Bombay. It was actually handed over to them by the British Crown. Why? Because the British King got Bombay as dowry from the Portuguese. Okay, Portuguese were the power who was controlling Bombay at that time. At that time, there was a marriage alliance between Portuguese princess and the British Crown. Okay, so as a dowry to the British Crown, Bombay was handed over to the British monarch. So British monarch handed over this dowry to the East India Company. And by that, all the three major presidencies came into the hands of East India Company. Okay. Towns and cities in pre-colonial times. So before we start looking into what happened in colonial times, before we start looking into how the British changed India, we have to understand how it was before the British. Then only we will get to compare what differences occurred. Okay, so first thing first, we are looking into pre-colonial times, what happened in towns and cities. We have to understand that in the pre-colonial times, most of the towns were centered around the ruling class and the elite sections of the society. Correct? Princely states, for example, there was a king or a sultan who ruled over that area. There were some religious people also who had a lot of respect in the society. Some merchants and traders or the Vaishya class of people who did their usual business. But predominantly, the countryside was the area where we can see agricultural settlements, cultivation of land, rearing of animals, forests, etc. etc. Okay, so the countryside is a purely rural area where subsistence activities took place all over the time. In the towns, we have a bit more high level jobs. We can say it like that for the time being, because at those times it was considered as a better job. Okay, for example, artisans, traders, administrators, rulers, etc. etc. These were the people who ruled over these towns. But since these towns began to get crammed up, there was no area or not enough space to perform agriculture, or perform or make goods and raw materials which could be used for industrial purposes. So they have to depend on the countryside. They have to depend on the rural folk for availing all these materials. Okay, so the towns and villages depended mutually each other. Towns depended on the rural area for subsistence, for food, for raw materials, etc. etc. The rural people depended on towns for achieving some sort of financial incentives, because selling their products to the town folk was how the rural people got their wages or their income. Okay, so we have to understand that although the concept of town and village existed in these times, there was no clear-cut demarcation. There was no stark contrast between these two. Okay, so the separation between town and the countryside was actually fluid. Okay, countryside, not country. Countryside was actually very much fluid. It was not a clear-cut demarcation. Also, those people who had these vast areas of land in the rural setup, namely the mansabdars and jagirdars, they actually lived in cities only. Why? They did not live in the village. They lived in cities because cities had a better standard of living. Living in the cities also gave them, some kind of social status, which is considered very much respectable. For all this purpose, we had something known as absentee landlordism. Absentee landlordism means the landlord is not present in the said land. He lives somewhere else but manages things in the countryside. Alright, so the revenues of the kingdom flowed into the capital regularly. All in all, from different parts of the country, both from rural as well as town urban areas, the cash or the taxes constantly was put into the treasury of the king or treasury of the ruler, whoever it was. So from irrespective of any kind of distinction, the king or the ruler earned taxes and income from all over his territory. Also understand that because of this, because of his administrative powers, the ruling classes had a very high value in the society. Also, this king's palace was the nucleus of an urban settlement. So the urban settlement always concentrated around the palace. Similarly, religious institutions such as mosques, temples, etc. etc. For example, in South India, we have the very famous Brihadishwara temple. Okay, in the Brihadishwara temple, it is surrounded by lots and lots of economic activity areas, markets, high influence buildings, etc. etc. So temples were the focus of economic activity in South India. Similarly, in the northern India, during the time of the medieval period, especially during the time of 18th and 17th centuries, mosques, palaces, etc. etc. were the focus or the nucleus of settlement. Okay, so this was how the town and cities were arranged in the pre-colonial time. Now we have to see how the British changed all these things. What were the changes that happened in 18th century? Okay, I think now you will be able to compare everything that I am going to say with everything that I have already said. Fine. So the 18th century saw a lot of political and commercial realignments. We will see that many changes happened in social aspects, in political aspects, economical aspects, religious aspects, etc. 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 Okay, so the old towns went into decline and new towns started to develop. Old towns, for example, say Surat. Surat was a very famous center of trade. Similarly, Masuripatnam, another very important area of trade. These kinds of towns began to decline. And in their place, towns such as Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, etc. came into prominence. Why did this happen? Okay, we will look into that, but this is one question that we have to study. Also, this was the time when the Mughal power started to decline. Okay, Mughal power, which was a very mighty kingdom, mighty dynasty in the medieval India, which ruled all the way from 1526 to 1857, saw a drastic decline by the time of 18th century. After Aurangzeb, most of the Mughal emperors were incompetent and weak. and there were other reasons also which eventually led to the decline of Mughals. Okay, so decline of a very powerful dynasty has huge impacts in India's society also, economy as well. Okay, for example, the Mughal dynasty patronized artists, craft people, musicians, etc., etc. So once this patronization was lost, all these people became jobless. They had to strive or look for other jobs to survive. Okay, so this affected both the economy and the society. So all these things eventually contributed to the phase shift that happened in India since 18th century. Okay, so there was increasing importance to regional capitals. So by the decline of Mughal dynasty, some local autonomous rulers started forming independent dynasties, independent kingdoms. Alright, so we see many local kingdoms springing up in Lucknow, Hyderabad, Srirangapatnam, Pune, Nagpur, Baroda, Tanjore, etc., etc. So these kinds of cities started to gain more and more importance in the early part of 18th century. New urban settlements started coming up in all these areas, named as Qusba and Ganj. What is a Qusba and what is a Ganj? Qusba is the area where it is actually a small town. Okay, it is a small town where probably a noble lived. Okay, a town centered around a noble family or where a noble lived. It is known as a Qusba. Ganj is synonymous to market. So in all these newly formed cities or towns, we see that small clusters of population around a market around a noble started to come up, and slowly and eventually and gradually this will develop into a flourishing city. Okay, so the European commercial companies had to set up their bases in different places in the Mughal era. I think you already know this. Portuguese were the first power to come to India. They were followed by other Europeans. Finally, British, French, etc. came to India. All of them did not, immediately start their activities in Bombay or Calcutta or anything. Initially, they had to set up their factories in the lands provided to them by the Mughal emperors. Okay, so the Portuguese set their first base in Panaji, capital of Goa, in 1510. The Dutch started their activities in Masulipatanam in 1605. British in Madras in 1639. French in Pondicherry in 1673. Later on, Danish people, before that, the Danes will also come to India, and not much important, but still they also have their activities. So Europeans started arriving one by one by the time of the Mughal disintegration. Okay, so once these Europeans came to India, the nature of Indian mercantilism changed. The nature of Indian trade and economy completely shifted. Why? Because until now, we do not see anything like overseas trade. Most of the trade that happened in India was overland. Silk route, spice route, everything at that time was overland only. The sea connection was very rarely used. But these European powers were extremely powerful, extremely prominent, especially because of their naval superiority. Portuguese were the masters of the sea at that time. So were the British. Okay, so because of this naval superiority and because of using this naval might, Indian economy was changed over time into a maritime economy. So the land-based empires in Asia was replaced by a powerful sea-based European empire. Okay, mercantilism and capitalism became the definite nature of society. So basically, all these Europeans came to India not with the intention of ruling India forever. Their prime objective when they came was to trade, maximize profit, etc., etc. So mercantilism, or this activity of trading, developed in India. Capitalism also started developing in India because of these activities. Okay, so this is something that happens in India in the early part of 18th century that will eventually develop into colonialism and British capture of India. Fine, so this is how 18th century phase shifted India's society and India's economy. Now let's see about colonial cities. Okay, now we are going to look at colonial cities, and we are also going to see from where do we get all the information that we have about these colonial cities? Whenever I take a chapter in history, there is one slide in that chapter that will deal with the source of that information, because it is very important. I mean, this we are talking about, say, 200 years ago what happened, or 300 years ago what happened. So we need to be sure, or we need to identify the sources which gave us this information. Otherwise, this information is invalid. It has no credibility. Correct. So we have to identify the sources from where we get all this information. The major sources that we have looked into are the production of enormous data and detailed records kept by the British. Because most of the Indian population at that time was very much, say, illiterate. And because of this, they were not ready. They did not invest their time into making records. Indian ruling class did make records, but common man in India did not leave any records. So whatever we get is from British as well as the India's ruling elites. British on their hand kept everything very, everything, they noted down everything. For example, they conducted regular surveys, they generated statistical data, they published various official reports, they started mapping activities in India. Okay, so eventually they actually maintained a huge depository of data, which is very handy for the modern day historians to study about the said period. So why did they do all these things? They did all these things to understand from where they can get maximum profit. For example, they conducted surveys to identify Indian population, their demands, their what are their job activities, how many of them are into agriculture, how many of them are into trade. By understanding this, British has a better idea on the Indian society. They gained statistical data, published reports based on that, also started mapping. So why did they started mapping? So that they can understand the topography of India. They can understand which soil is present in which part of India. Is it fertile? What is the content of different chemicals in that soil? How much forest cover is there in India? How much land is available for agriculture? How much land is semi-arid or arid? These kinds of understanding is very important for a trading company. So British did this with all precision and very, with due care. Okay. By the time of late 19th century, British tried to raise money for administering the towns through systematic annual collection of municipal taxes. So eventually, these trading companies started establishing themselves as Diwans and establishing themselves as the ruling sections in the Indian society. They collected the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa initially, and eventually they annexed various other neighboring territories and set up their colonial power. Once they started annexing these territories, once they started administering these territories, not just as trading nations but also as a political power, what happened? They started imposing municipal taxes and they started imposing various other kind of taxes into the Indians. So British actually did not collect all these taxes by themselves. Okay, I mean they actually delegated this power to some other influential sections in the society. This is how British managed to be friends with the top level of Indian society. They oppressed the bottom level. They oppressed the poor peasants, kisans, etc., etc. But the ruling elites were always in favorable for British. Why? Because British granted them these kinds of powers. They can collect these taxes and they can keep a part of these taxes with themselves and they can give back, a fixed amount to British. Alright, so this is how they eventually start spreading throughout India. So the first All India census was conducted in 1872. Okay, I mean it was attempted but not successfully completed. 1872. You have to understand that right now we have a practice of taking census every 10 years. Correct. Last census was in 2011. So the next census is coming up in next year. So once in 10 years, we will conduct this population census to understand the demography, to understand the statistics, etc., etc. Alright. So this practice of a decennial census was first started in the year 1881. And since then, every 10 years, we have these census. Okay. So because I'm talking about this, you also have to read about something that is related with current affairs. What is the difference between a census, the Citizenship Amendment Act, and the NPR, National population registry, NRC. Okay, all these activities have been in the news for the past year. So please do look into the relations between all these things. Okay, some of the political factions were even opposing census because they feared it is the NRC. Okay, so you have to read on that also as far as the current affairs materials are concerned. Anyway, let's come back to this topic. Okay, so the first census, the decennial census was started in 1881. So the British tabulated various results out of this, and they had many, numbers and statistics which they derived out of the census. The problem is we cannot exactly rely on these figures. These figures can actually be misleading. Why? Because we are not sure who collected this data. British did it. It is in the official records of Britain. But who are the people who actually did this, who collected this? What are their qualifications? Or are they at all qualified to do such a drive? And why and how were these data gathered? Why did they gather this data? What was the intention of British in gathering this data? Because this data eventually will, the collection method will eventually depend upon their intentions. Correct? Also, how was this data collected? Was the sample taken properly? Was this a door-to-door census where they went to each and every house and collected the data? We do not know any of these things. So, although we have these records, we are not sure about how much reliable they are. Okay, but we know that census commissioners devised categories for classifying different sections of the population. Okay, so for classifying various sections of the population, say Hindus, say Muslims, or say upper classes or the elite classes, the middlemen or the middle class people or lower sections of the society. So such kind of classifications were employed by the census commissioners to make the job easier. Problem is, these classifications were extremely arbitrary and failed to capture the fluidity or the fluid nature of Indian society. Say for example, they are classifying based on the job, occupation. Okay, so they are conducting this census say during the time of July or say during the time of a crop season. And when they do this census in a crop season, a person will be doing the agricultural job. So they will write down he is an agriculturist person or a farmer. Problem is, during the off seasons or during the gap between these two agricultural seasons, maybe the farmer will actually go to somewhere else and do some other activities. Maybe he will engage into allied activities. Okay, maybe he will go as a trader or a craftsman or a blacksmith. Clear? So one person used to have multiple jobs in the society. But Britishers actually recorded only one of them. We do not know if this is enough to have a clear picture of the Indian society. Because this is not comprehensive. Britishers have obviously missed a lot in the census. So people were suspicious of the census also. It is not just the issue at Britishers' part. But some of the data is wrong because of the lack of clarity towards Indians. People were not ready to give up their personal details. You won't share your personal details with some stranger, right? So the people of India too had the same kind of reservations. Okay, so they thought that Britishers are collecting all this data to impose more taxes on them. So they were reluctant to give away all this information. Similarly, upper class people were not willing to give away information about their women. Most of the Indian society, the traditional conservative orthodox society was, very much conservative, and for that matter, they were not ready to give up information about their women. Women were always held within the households, not allowed to engage in public sphere. Okay, so when British officers came to collect their information, most of the upper class families were not ready to provide the same. Also, people were claiming identities that they associated with higher status. So when an officer go and ask you about your occupation, instead of saying that you are a farmer or instead of saying that you are a blacksmith, the person might say that he is a merchant. He might also be selling his his agricultural products in town. Okay, so although he really is an agriculturist, he would say that he is a trader. Why? Because traders had a better social status. So in order to claim this status, or at least in order to artificially hype his social status, people used to give wrong information to the census officials. Okay. Also, figures of mortality and disease were very difficult to collect. In order to have a perfect idea about the population, it is very important to know how many of them are alive, how many of them are dead. I mean, that is a basic fact, right? We have to have an idea about the strength of the population. How many are still alive, how many are dead, or what are the diseases that are spreading into this demographic. Okay, problem is these data were very hard to collect because not every deaths were registered. If the death is not registered, then officially that person is still alive. Correct. I mean, government have no idea that person is dead because the death is not registered. Similarly, if an illness is not treated by a doctor, or say if it is not reported, or say if the doctor is not a licensed doctor, then also such information will not get into the hands of Britain. There were many traditional doctors in India. Okay, Vaidyas, you call them Vaidyas, etc., etc. They were the traditional Ayurvedic doctors. They were not licensed or anything. They used to do it as a traditional activity. So these kinds of treatments often went unorganized, unregulated. Okay, so all these gaps in the society made it extremely difficult for these census officials to get a correct picture of Indian society. Okay, now we are going to see the trends of change. We are going to see the 19th century and we are going to see what all changed in this period. So until 19th century, whatever happened, we have covered. Okay, at least you have a very brief basic idea on Indian society and the impact of Britain and the Europeans on the Indian society. Okay, now we are going to see what happened between 1800 and 1900, the 19th century. So after 1800, the urbanization in India was sluggish. So till now, the British as well as other European companies wanted India to become more and more urbanized. Why? Because urbanization will favor trade. Correct. Rather than a rural economy, urban economy will provide them with more and more trade. Problem is, in the 18th century, 19th century, the industrialized England started to view India not as a area from where they can collect goods, but instead they viewed India as a raw material supplier as well as a market for their finished goods. Okay, so they did not want India to urbanize now. They did not want India to become industrialized anymore. Alright, so once they started having this, neglecting kind of mentality, India's urbanization also became extremely sluggish. There were significant variations in the patterns of urban development in different regions. So even then, although urbanization was sluggish, we have to understand that certain regions of India developed at a particular pace, while other regions developed at different rates. Okay, so there was lack of coordination between various territories of India, and we can see some kind of a partial kind of development. Some parts of India developed well, some parts of India lagged behind. Okay, some part of India were actually neglected, so and so. Alright, so an irregular development all in all. So the growth of the three presidencies as the new commercial and administrative centers was at the expense of other existing centers. So basically, Bombay, Madras and Calcutta were obviously the most developed cities throughout India. Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, the three main presidencies. You have to understand that these presidencies developed not just because of their geography or because of their demography, but these developed with the expense of or at the expense of other princely states or other provinces. Okay, so these were major towns because it had port access, it had access to the sea. Problem is, those areas which were landlocked had huge resources there itself, had a huge amount of population, were important centers of trade or say economy, but they were not connected to sea. So everything that went out of India or everything that came into India had to use these three ports, one of these three ports. Because of these reasons, these three developed very, proportionately very high. Industrial revolution that happened in England around this time eventually changed these three areas, and Bombay, Calcutta and Madras became the entry point for British manufactured goods and for export of Indian raw materials. I already explained this point. This is how we see that visible change in the British policy towards India. Initially, East India Company was very much fascinated by Indian products. They used to buy lots of silk, lot of cotton, lot of pepper, etc. and send it to Europe. But now onwards, rather than buying cotton cloth or silk cloth, what do they do? They will buy raw cotton, then take it to Europe, use their machinery to make it a finished good, and bring it back to India and sell it at very cheap rates, thereby destroying the traditional handicraft industry of India as well. So Indian economy began to be drained during this time as a result of industrialization in the European nations. Okay, this is also the time when we see the introduction of railways. Britishers understood that India is a land of resources. India is filled with resources, all kinds of resources. Problem is, not everything is easily approachable using a ship or using a vessel. Why? Because there are many resource centers in the center part of India, say, which are not connected to the ocean or connected to any kind of water body. So they have to find some source of transport which they can employ for easy access of these resources. You cannot rely on bullock carts and horse tongas or anything. You need some kind of high machinery for this. This is the reason why railways were introduced in India. Not because of Britishers' concern on public transport, but rather they wanted to connect the interiors of India with the ports so that they can easily get these raw materials to the ports. Okay, so finally railways were introduced in 1853. The economic activity gradually shifted away from the traditional towns that were located in old routes and rivers. So there were very famous places such as Ujjain. Okay, Ujjain was a very famous area. Patna was another important area. But problem was these areas were landlocked areas and they were important only because they were situated in ancient traditional trade routes. Okay, during the time of Ashoka in ancient India, Ujjain was important because it was the point where Uttarapatha and the Dakshinapatha, two prominent trade routes, passed through. Okay, so such important cities actually lost their significance once the railways were introduced. Because now railway stations, wherever they are set up, became the area of economic activity. Fine, so this is how the changes started beginning in the 19th century. Now we are going to see what were the new towns like, the ports, forts, centers for services, etc. etc. Alright, so just to point out before we continue, please remember that there is a quiz at 5:30 p.m. using the Unacademy learning app, and the topic is Ancient India. So if you have not already downloaded the Unacademy learning app, please download it and be ready by 5:30. Okay, so let's continue. So by 18th century, Madras, Calcutta, Bombay, etc. became very, very, very important ports. English East India Company wanted to develop these areas a bit more. Why? Because they faced many kinds of troubles from the local folk as well as other Europeans. I mean, there was a competition between Britain and other European nations, say France, Portuguese, etc., etc., for having monopoly over Indian trade. Okay, so they wanted to increase their defense mechanisms, increase their offensive systems. For this purpose, once they built factories in these cities, they began to be fortified. The British East India Company started constructing very strong forts around their factories. Best example is the Fort St. George in Madras, Fort William in Calcutta, etc. etc. Bombay also had a fort. Okay, such constructions began to come up. Again, the problem is that within these forts, only Europeans were allowed to live. Or say elite sections of Indian society was also accepted in these forts. But the common man in India was not allowed to live inside these forts. They were actually evicted from this area and they had to live in the outside area or in the outskirts of these forts, which came to be known as Black Town. So the inside area of this fort came to be known as White Town, and whatever is outside in the outskirts of these cities came to be known as Black Town. And once this kind of discrimination started appearing in India, eventually we see that the policy of British completely changes into something that is much more racist. Okay, so a racial superiority is now being imposed on Indians by these Britishers. Indians are now considered as inferior. So, the Europeans are given extra protection, extra quality of life, extra materialistic luxury, so and so. Okay, so the raw materials were transported to these cities for export, and there were plentiful cheap labor available. So all the raw materials from across India came to these particular forts or came to these particular establishments. Also, India had a huge population even at that time, so there were cheap labor available. Okay, so all these went into the liking of Britain. In 1850s, the cotton mills were set up by Indian merchants and entrepreneurs in Bombay, and European-owned jute mills were established on the outskirts of Calcutta. So here we see the establishment of two very important economic activities, or two very important exports from India. One is cotton, other one is jute. Jute were actually set up by European officials in Calcutta because the soil in Bengal is perfect for jute cultivation. And at Bengal, by Bengal I mean both East and West Bengal. At that time there is no Bangladesh, so that entire region around the Sundarban Delta and all is ideal for jute cultivation. So jute factory was set up somewhere there. Similarly, Bombay was chosen for setting up the cotton mill. Indian cotton, also known as calico, was extremely in demand throughout Europe, and there was high price for the same. Okay, so a lot of cotton was exported to Europe from India. There was only two proper industrious cities in India, that is Kanpur, which specialized in leather, woolen and cotton textiles, and Jamshedpur, specializing in steel. Okay, so despite Bombay, Calcutta and Madras being extremely flourishing cities and having high economic activities, problem was that these were simply points of sale, points of trade, points of mercantilism, nothing more. It became an urban area, it became a very much flourishing city, but these cities were never properly industrialized. Industrialization happened only in two cities at those times, that is Kanpur, which was very famous for the leather, woolen and cotton textiles, and Jamshedpur, which was specializing on steel. These were the industrial towns of India. Bombay, Madras and Calcutta were actually economically flourishing towns, but not properly industrialized. They were merely urban centers, that's all, nothing more. Alright, new urban milieu. So the urban society started developing in these cities. Now we have to see how this shaped out. I mean, we understood that because of these economic activities, urbanization happened in all these cities. Now we have to understand how this urbanization eventually came out to be. Okay, so the political power and patronage shifted from Indian rulers to the merchants of East India Company. One second, let me look at your comments. Vikrant, I did not get your question. Saubhagya is asking why they were called White Town and Black Town. White Town and Black Town was named after the color of Indians itself. Okay, those people who lived in the European forts were actually the white people, the Europeans, Britishers, Portuguese, Dutch, etc. etc. So it was known as White Town. Indian skin color are comparatively darker and they were considered as inferior. So they were known as Black Towns, that's all. Okay, those people evicted from these fortified areas had to be settled somewhere else, right? So they all went and settled in the outskirts of the cities, and this section of the city came to be known as Black Town. Okay, now the new urban milieu. So basically, once this economic activity started developing, or the patronage to the Indian rulers started to shift in favor of East India Company. Earlier, Indian rulers were the centers of all activities, right? The rulers used to patronize merchants because the court was very much flourishing. All the trade, etc., were conducted by the Sultan only. There were proper taxes which was levied by the Sultan or the king, whatever. But now, these royalties started losing their position in the society, and Britishers started to take over. Now British trade became even more profitable. So the Indian merchants also changed their attitude, changed their orientation in favor of the Europeans. The economic activity near the river or the sea led to development of docks, gardens, houses, etc. etc. Okay, so not everything happened overland. There were many inland waterways in India as well. I mean, even right now, government is developing some inland waterways, right? We have National Waterway 1, 2, 3, etc. etc. So similarly, even at those times, some trade were carried out using these waterways. Because of these activities, we see that plenty of docks and gardens, etc. were set up on the banks of various rivers. We can see huge warehouses and godowns which were set up on the banks of these rivers. And because of this trading activity, that area also eventually become urban. Okay, so the urbanization in India was more or less because of the economic activity or economic importance of that particular area. Once these centers became flourishing, once these centers achieved that level of economy, the racially exclusive clubs started occurring all over India. Only these clubs are meant for the elite sections only. I mean the high rich sections only. Okay, the poor people are not admitted into these kinds of clubs. Race courses, theaters. Okay, so eventually one by one everything, all kinds of luxury and all kinds of high quality living started happening in all these centers. The rich Indians bought large tracts of land as a future investment. They also threw lavish parties during festivals. They built temples, so and so. So they understood that once they are very much rich, now they can afford to buy huge tracts of land. They also knew that once the economy starts flourishing in these areas, the value of the land will automatically increase. Okay, so buying a land right now is an investment for the future. Even right now it is true, correct? Real estate is something everybody is attracted to. Why? Because the land value will always keep on going up. It very seldom comes down. Okay, so here the rich Indians also invested a lot of money into land. Similarly, they threw lavish parties at that time. Why? Because these parties were considered as something very much attractive for the Europeans. They wanted to show their might to the Europeans. They wanted to make friends with the rich Europeans. So they threw these parties, they invited the Europeans and made friends. Similarly, they built temples. Why? They did not build temples to, appease the peasants or anything. They built temples for showing their power, their might, their authority. Okay, they are building a temple which will give them a socially high status. Okay, owner of a temple, that was considered as a really high status in the society. So just like the rich people had all these comforts, the poor people had all their opposites. Okay, so the poor people were employed as cooks, palanquin bearers, coachmen, guards, porters, construction and dock workers. Because of all these activities, they were never, into the mainstream rich activities. They had to do all these menial jobs and they were always kept as a separate section in the society. They were always discriminated. They did not live in huge mansions or monuments. They lived in makeshift huts which were in the black towns. Okay, and this is the social setup when the revolt of 1857 happens. Okay, there is clear divisions in the society. Some sections are completely alienated from Indians. Poor people are completely neglected. So there is huge frustration among all the people. So now 1857 revolt happens. I told you how it progressed in yesterday's class. I hope you remember all that. Okay, now so we are going to move to the next section. Okay, after the 1857 revolt, what happened? The most important thing that happened after 1857 revolt is the change in British attitude towards India. Okay, so Britishers' attitude in India were shaped by constant fear of rebellion. So from now onwards, Britishers did not want to, do anything that will, hurt the feelings of Indian common man. Okay, earlier they used to interfere in Indian religious activities. They stopped sati. They encouraged widow remarriage, which were all against the conservative traditional society of India. Okay, but now they changed their policies. They stopped interfering with all these things. They started supporting the Indian orthodoxy and Indian traditional systems, okay, they tried to gain favor of the Indian masses. So pasture lands and agricultural fields around the older towns were cleared. Okay, although they did all these things, they were still very much suspicious of Indian people. They were not ready to, hope for the best. They wanted to make sure that practically they have the upper hand. So once they fortified their settlements, they also cleared a huge tract of land around their fort. So for example, if this is the fort, okay, say this is the fort, then huge tracts of land around the fort was actually cleared. If there were trees, it were all cut down. If there were some other buildings, it were all destroyed, and it was made a plain land. Why? Because now, if a foreign army or if the locals try to attack this fort, British will have clear view on the attackers, and they can take them down from using the guns and other kinds of artillery from the fort. That is why when you see all those ancient or old films or any films that is based on history, you will see that the fort stands alone in a huge plain ground. There is no fort that is right at the center of a forest. There is no fort that is right at the center of an urban town, which is completely clustered. Forts are always alone and its surrounding areas are plain. Why? Because this is a strategic enhancement for the security and defense of this particular fort. Okay, so Britishers employed the same thing. Problem was, it is one thing for these people to protest, but it is quite another for certain diseases to spread. Inside the fort, life quality was extremely high. Cleanliness, sanitation, etc. were taken care of properly. But in the black towns, in the outskirts of cities, outside these forts, quality of life was very low. Hygiene was not very much well taken. Sanitation was pretty much pathetic. So what happened? Naturally, various kinds of diseases started spreading. Okay, cholera, plague, all these started spreading. So Britishers were fearful that this might also spread into the European settlements, into the white towns. So in order to stop this, they started to make more and more stringent measures for sanitation and public health. So this is why Britishers started taking care of public health. Not because of any, sympathy or anything, not because of the mindset of doing something good, but rather they wanted to keep themselves safe from all these kinds of diseases. So they invested into the public health. All right. Okay, Kanna. Good evening. Yes, Navya. Navya, there is a playlist. You can search my name. Okay. Just search my name. Madhav Sankar NCERT. Search it like this in YouTube and you can see everything. Okay. From class 6 onward up till class 12, NCERT textbooks are all done by me. History textbooks. Okay. So you can see all those classes. Okay. So now this section comes to an end here. Now we are moving into another region completely. That is the hill stations. Okay. We are done with Bombay, Madras and Calcutta and the urban economic settlements. Now we are going to see certain specific hill stations which became very much important in these times. Okay, so the first hill stations. The hill stations developed because of their connections and needs of British Army. I will tell you how. Okay, so Shimla. Shimla is a very famous hill station. Earlier, now it is known as Shimla. Earlier it was known as Simla, S-I-M-L-A. Okay, so Simla was founded during the course of Gurkha War in 1815 and 1816. There was some, local wars between British Army and the natives of that region. So this war came to be known as the Gurkha War because the Gurkhas were the settlers there. So Simla became important because of this particular war. The Anglo-Maratha War of 1818 led to the British interest in Mount Abu. Similarly, Darjeeling, another very famous hill station, a tourist destination, was developed because of the skirmishes between the Sikh rulers. Okay, so this is how these hill stations began to become more and more attractive. Britishers had to conduct certain campaigns in these stations and they loved the climate. you know where the position of Britain is, right? England is in the northern end of Europe. It is a very temperate region, very cold region, and they did not have to suffer tropical climate in Britain. But in India, climatic conditions were pathetic. I mean, for them it was very much unbearable. Full-time heat, or extremes of heat, 40 plus degrees, etc., etc. So they did not favor this tropical climate. So once they went to these hill stations, they were extremely happy with the climate there. This is how they started developing these hill stations. This is the reason why they started developing these hill stations. Temperate and cool climate of Indian hills was seen as an advantage. Also, Britishers believed that hot weather is associated with epidemics. Okay, epidemics happen in hot weather. I mean, at least they believed that. And in cool weather, maybe the germs will not be that much active. Such theories were very much prevalent. So Britishers chose to live in these kinds of hill stations. Hill stations were also developed as sanitariums. That is, places where soldiers could be sent to rest and recover from illness. So once some battle is conducted, some of the British soldiers will become wounded or injured. Okay, or some of them would needs to take some recovery time. So all these soldiers were also sent into these hill stations for their recovery. Okay, this is how hill stations become more and more important. Britishers started using these climatic conditions in favor for them. Initially, when these hill stations were developed, Indians were not allowed to enter these areas. Okay, Indians were actually restricted from these hill stations. It was solely used by Europeans because basically hill stations were just like Britain in India, a small British island in India based on climate. Okay, so we can another beautiful example. In 1864, Viceroy John Lawrence officially moved his council to Simla. Okay, from Delhi, he actually moved it to Simla. Why? Delhi is in summer season, Delhi is like, burning like a furnace. It will feel like 45 degrees Celsius or something like that. Correct. So he moved, the British Governor General, John Lawrence, moved his office to Simla in 1864. And this practice was actually continued by the future Governor Generals also. During the summer season, the office will be shifted to these hill stations. Simla became official residence of Commander-in-Chief of Indian Army as well. So most of the British officials chose various kinds of hill stations in order to cope up with the Indian climate. Finally, very later, once tea plantations were introduced in these hill regions, Indians were also allowed to come in. Okay, this tea plantations and coffee plantations are the only reasons why Indians were allowed in these hill stations. Why? Because tea and coffee cannot be cultivated in normal tropical climates. They want certain kind of geography, certain kind of temperature, certain kind of pressure, certain kind of humidity. Correct. So plantations were ideal in slopes, hill slopes. So once this was set up, and once more and more demand for tea and coffee increased, poor people from India also were allowed into hill stations. Okay. Social life in the new cities. So let's look at the social life in these new cities. So there was dramatic contrast between extreme wealthy and extreme poverty. I do not have to explain it. I think you already know it. Okay, there was obviously huge contrast between the living standards of these two people. New transport facilities were introduced. Initially, India had only bullock carts. Later, horse-drawn carriages were introduced, which were comparatively faster. Then trams were introduced, then buses. Okay, finally, even railways came to being. So once these were introduced, what is the huge benefit here? The most important benefit is that people could live at a distant place and still work in the city. Earlier, people used to live at the place which was closer to their workplace. For example, Indian society was major into agriculture. So the agricultural land of that farmer will be right outside his house. Correct, right? Even now, if you go to a rural area, you can see that a person live in a house which is just adjacent to his farm. But in urban centers, it is different. You might be living in, say, Madras or Chennai, but you will be working in Bangalore, or you might be working in Mumbai. Why is this possible? This is possible because we have transportation, modern sense of transportation systems, which has drastically cut down the time for transport. So this, when introduced in India for the first time, was something of a novelty. Until then, people were not in the habit of moving to long distance areas for work. So a new kind of work culture was introduced in India due to the introduction of new transportation systems. Okay, so creation of public places, public parks, theaters, cinema halls, etc., started coming up. So once economic activity flourishes, entertainment also is looked into. Okay, entertainment industry also started coming up. So cinema halls, theaters, public parks, all were developed by Europeans as well as rich Indians. Also, new social groups started forming, and the old identities of people were no longer important. So people came to cities in search of new jobs. They found some jobs in various factories or industries or whatever. And once they did that, they started earning a comparatively better amount of money. So what happens? What happens is that earlier the person was referred to as a agriculturist or a farmer or a peasant. But now he is a worker in an industry. He's an industrial worker. So comparatively, positioning himself as an employee of the company is better rather than saying that I'm a peasant. At least that was how it was considered at that time. Okay, so new social groups started emerging. We see the rise of middle class in India. Okay, these new social groups were known as middle class. Okay, but comparatively better living standards than the agriculturists, but not in the ranks of elites as well. Somewhere in the middle. That is the middle class sections of Indian society. So the middle class has increased. So once people began to get more and more money as a salary or as wage, what happened? Their quality of life improved. They began to invest in certain things that they wouldn't invest otherwise. For example, education. If you are a poor farmer, or if you are a poor peasant who cannot afford to make food for yourself, then you will not invest in education of your sons and daughters. But if you have enough money, then you will definitely go into all these things. You will invest into education. So the rise of middle class also started more and more investment into education. So new educational institutions such as schools, colleges, universities, etc. began to be set up. Also, once people got more and more education, they began to question government decisions. They began to create public debates and discussions on various aspects. People began to understand the idea of reasoning and logic. They began to reason everything with the government. They began to become more and more civilized, or they began to become more and more, literate, as well as a very much politically aware people. Okay, so new opportunities for women. So this did not happen just for men. All these were happening in the Indian society, and Indian society also had a huge section of women. So this led to more opportunities for women. Problem was that although the Britishers were okay with women's participation in all these things, Indian conservative section was not so much in that matter. Even the Indian intelligentsia, the so-called Indian intelligentsia, which worked for the betterment of women in India, was not very much happy with a woman working in all these public places. According to them, women should not be oppressed, women should not be depressed or anything, but women still belong to house. Their job was to raise children, their job was to take care of the family, etc. They can get educated, everything, but still they are not supposed to work in a public place. Even Indian intelligentsia thought so. Okay, so the conservatives feared that educated women might actually undermine the traditional systems of Indian society. They considered it as a very bad thing. Okay, so the women who actually moved out of the household to work in these public places were actually censored socially. Some were outcasted, some were socially censored. Okay, so condition of women still remained a pathetic mess even at this time. Okay, it will improve only later. We will see that in the coming chapters. Another new class within the cities was the laboring poor or the working class. Cities, as they found these cities as places of opportunity. I mean, they cannot depend on agriculture forever, because agriculture is hugely dependent on Indian monsoon. Okay, if you do not have a proper irrigation system, the only source of water is the Indian monsoons. And Indian monsoons, you cannot rely on it too much. So those farmers who were poor agriculturists, they actually went into faraway cities in search of jobs and opportunities. So cost of living in city is high. Okay, so he cannot take his family with him. He have to go there, he have to find a job, he have to make some living, and then he can bring his family. Okay, so this is also the time when we see a lot of men leave back their wives and children in the villages and shift to cities in order to find new jobs. Okay, so we find a different culture altogether developing in these cities around this time. Fine. Segregation, town planning and architecture, Madras, Calcutta and Bombay. So this is actually the final session of this this particular theory class, but this is a bit lengthy. Okay, so at 5:30 we will start the quiz. I hope to complete this by 5:30. Segregation, town planning and architecture, especially in Madras, Calcutta and Bombay. Company had first set up its trading activities in well-established port of Surat. Already I think I told you, Surat in Gujarat. This was one of the prime cities of Britain initially, before the development of Bombay. Surat was the main city. So the search for textiles brought British merchants to the eastern coast. I mean, Indian textiles were of extreme demand in Europe. So the search for these Indian textiles, it led to British people coming to the Coromandel coast, that is the eastern coast of India, in 1639. And in 1639, they established a trading post in Madras Pattanam, or Madras, simply Madras, modern day Chennai. Okay, so this settlement at that time was also known by the local name Chenapattanam. Okay, Madras Pattanam was also known as Chenapattanam. Eventually, British East India Company purchased the rights of settlement from the local Telugu landlords known as Nayaks of Kalahasti. So this is how they acquired Madras. They actually bought the right of settlement from the local landlords or the local Telugu lords named as Nayaks. Okay, Nayaks of Kalahasti. So because of the rivalry that Britain had with other European nations, especially France, what did they do? They actually fortified Madras, and this is how Fort St. George was born. I told you this in the previous slide, so not explaining further. Okay, so Fort St. George was born because of the rivalry between English East India Company and France. Once this fort came up, this became the nucleus of the White Town, where almost all the Europeans lived. Company did not permit any marriages with Indians. So they were, once this concept of White Town and Black Town arose, what happened? I already told you, the concept of racism also developed very, very high. Okay, so because of this racist attitude, the British officers were very strict that Europeans should not marry Indians. If you have studied modern India, there you would have studied that some of the Portuguese people who came to India actually encouraged them to marry Indians. Okay, but here we can see a completely contradictory kind of stance by Britain. Okay, because they considered themselves as racially superior. Okay, so other than English, the Dutch and Portuguese were allowed to stay because they were also European as well as Christian. Okay, because they were Europeans, they were white-skinned, and because they were Christian, these Portuguese and these Dutch people were also allowed to stay within the White Towns or within the Fort St. George. In the Black Towns, all other sections of Indian society which they considered inferior, such as the weavers, artisans, middlemen, interpreters, etc., etc., they had to live there. But understand that these interpreters had a huge role to play in the company's trade. So they eventually managed to make it into the White Towns. Why? Who are these interpreters? Interpreters are also known as Dvibhashi. Dvibhashi means a person who can talk in two languages. Dvi means two, Bhashi means language. So Dvibhashi means a person who can talk in two languages. So they knew the local language, they also knew English. So they acted as interpreters and translators for the English lords. This earned them huge favors from the Britishers. And, and eventually their life standard began to increase. Okay, so we will see that some sections of the Indian society actually changes their social status and their economic status and become more and more powerful and influential in the Indian society. Okay, now the Black Town. Within the Black Town itself, there were many discriminations. Okay, I told you there were artisans, there were peasants, there were blacksmiths, goldsmiths, craftspeople, etc. etc. Problem is, not everybody was seen as equal. So even among them, there were discriminations and distinctions. Okay, so Chintadripet, okay, this particular region in Tamil Nadu was actually meant for weavers alone. Washermanpet was actually a colony of dryers and bleachers of cloth. I mean, just like the name suggests, Washermanpet. Peta means a area, okay, or locality or a settlement. Basically, Peta means a settlement. Okay, so similarly, Royapuram. Royapuram was a settlement for Christian boatmen who worked for the company. Okay, so within these black towns itself, there are discriminations and divisions. You can imagine how it is. Okay, if Indians has standard united against the British, irrespective of the caste system, religion, etc., then things would have been different. But unfortunately, even in these situations, Indians were very much divided. Okay, so the Dvibhashas worked as agents and merchants, acting as intermediaries between Indian society and British, and thereby earning favor of the British. Okay, Dvibhashas are people who are who can speak in two languages, one English and the other the local language. So the initial jobs with the company were monopolized by Vellalas. So in South India, Vellalas are actually the name given to rich landlords and peasants. Okay, Vellalas are the rich landlords. So initially most of the company jobs were taken away by these Vellalas, and they began to become very, very prominent in this society. So the Brahmanas, who had traditionally inherited a high status in the society, they were now becoming less economically successful. Okay, the company officials or the company workers had better economical status than the Brahmanas, who were traditionally better positioned. So once the Vellalas began to become socially prominent, Brahmins also started competing for these positions. They also wanted jobs in the company. Okay, now we can see that various social sections now fight it out to get a job in the East India Company. Telugu Komatis, for example, they were into grain trade. Parayars and Vanyars, they were actually the laboring poor. So such kinds of sections, so different sections lived in the Indian society. Also, in those areas where the Nawabs actually stayed, were actually Muslim settlements. So the Nawab of Arcot, he actually settled in a place known as Triplicane. So the Triplicane area became a Muslim settlement. Similarly, Mylapore and Triplicane, the remaining portion of Triplicane was a Hindu populate majority area. So it was known as a Hindu settlement. Similarly, Saint Thome and the church close to Saint Thome, this was a major settlement for the Christians, Catholic Christians. Okay, so based on all these factors, we see that within the Black Town itself, there are various divisions based on job, based on religion, based on caste, etc. etc. Okay, so the wealthy Indians too started living like the British, and new suburbs created. So the people who got a job in the company, who started earning a lot of money. Similarly, the Indian elites who had inherited some money traditionally, hereditarily, all these people began to strive for a life like the Europeans. Okay, they wanted to live like Europeans with all these luxuries. This change of attitude led to the development of suburbs. Suburbs means what? It is outside the urban area, but it has living standards which are comparatively better than the black towns. Okay, those are suburbs. So development of suburbs happened as a result of the rise of certain sections in the Indian society who were economically better compared to the black town people. Alright, so this is how suburbs or the buffer zones actually develop. Town planning in Calcutta. We can look at a typical example here. Town planning in Calcutta. Modern town planning. So, you have to, first thing to note here is, wherever Britishers developed something, they developed it in a very methodological fashion. They developed it with proper planning, etc., etc. So they used the technique of modern town planning. They prepared a layout for the entire urban space and the regulation of urban land use. Okay, they wanted to do everything very much professionally and scientifically. There were many reasons why British took upon themselves the task of town planning. Okay, it wasn't chosen arbitrarily or anything. They took up town planning all by themselves because of various reasons. Earlier, before the arrival of British, town planning was mostly done by Indians collectively. Okay, with the advice of certain group of people, the king will make a decision, and together there will be a council or something like that, and the planning decisions are taken in that council. So it was a collective, method of development. But as far as Britishers were concerned, they took it all by themselves. They did not ask the opinion of any Indians or the local society or anything. They decided and they implemented. Okay, why? Because they were concerned about their defense. Because they did not forget what happened in 1756. In 1756, the settlement of Britain in Calcutta was actually overran by Siraj-ud-Dowla. Okay, Siraj-ud-Dowla, the person who lost the very next year in the Battle of Plassey in 1757, he actually managed to overrun British settlements in 1756, the year before that. Once this happened, Britishers understood that you cannot trust the natives of India. You have to be ready with all your defenses. Okay, so they planned everything based on a future vision of defense. So they built a new fort, one that could not easily be attacked, and this fort came to be known as Fort William. Okay, Fort William was erected and British settlement in Calcutta was consolidated. Okay, also just as I have mentioned earlier, they left vast open space which came to be known as Maidan or the Garar Math. Okay, around the fort there was huge area which was left plain without any kind of obstruction in a strategic point of view. Such vast areas came to be known as a Maidan or a Garar Math. So no obstruction to the straight line of fire from the fort, strategically, defensively. In 1798, Lord Wellesley came to India as the Governor General. When he came here, he started building a massive palace for himself. It came to be known as the Government House. Okay, you can see a picture here, the Government House, a really massive palace. Look at that. You can see that there nearby the land is completely plain. There is no other, local settlements or trees or anything that obstruct the line of sight. Okay, so such constructions were implemented by Britain around this time. Also, while they planned these cities, they were very much vigilant about the condition of the Indian part of the city as well. Within the fort, it is the European part. They did it, they controlled it very well. But they were also keen on what was happening outside the forts. Because as earlier I have mentioned, the spread of diseases was very much of a concern for them. For this purpose, they made sure that there was proper sanitation and proper hygienic conditions throughout the development area. Okay, you can see some pictures here. Okay, you can see a part of European town in Calcutta, which is shown in this map. You can see bazaar, a painting of a bazaar that leads to the Chitpur road in Calcutta. Here you can see another basti in Calcutta. Okay, you can see all these pictures in your NCERT, so please do look into that as well. So as I have mentioned, public health was a very important concern for Britain. Okay, public health became an idea that was proclaimed in projects of town clearance and town planning. It was very much of importance. To look into these aspects, British formed a new committee. Okay, to take care of town planning. To take care of public health in town planning, they created lottery committee. Okay, they created a committee known as lottery committee. Why is this name lottery committee? I mean, it is very obvious. Okay, the committee was funded through the collection from lotteries. Okay, lotteries are sold at particular amount, right? So everything, the collection that they get from this selling of these lotteries were together put for funding this lottery committee. From this, we can understand that British government did not want to spare any kind of fund for the development of sanitation and hygiene in the Indian sections of the society. Okay, they actually left the collection from a lotteries for this purpose. So they never cared about public health in the social aspect. That is very much clear. Okay, so in 1817, road building in the Indian part of the city and clearing of the river bank of encroachments was conducted as a part of the lottery committee recommendations. Okay, I mean, some part of Indian city, the roads were constructed there, and all the settlements that stood on the way of this road was cleared. Similarly, everything that was encroaching river banks were all destroyed. Okay, so these all were conducted on the basis of lottery committee recommendations. To make the Indian areas of Calcutta cleaner, they also removed many huts and displaced the laboring people. Okay, I mean, poor people used to live in makeshift tents and thatched huts, etc., etc. These did not have proper sanitation facilities or toilets within them, and the Britishers thought that all these are causing various diseases and helping the spread of these diseases. So they destroyed everything that was unscientifically built. Okay, so poor sections of the society had to migrate or were forced or expelled from these lands by Europeans. In 1817, cholera started spreading in India. Okay, cholera in Calcutta region, cholera started spreading. Later, in 1896, plague made its appearance. So the Britishers obviously thought that all these diseases were spread in such huge quantities because of the poor hygienic conditions in the Indian section of society. Not only the British thought this, some of the Indian merchants also thought the same. For example, the prominent merchants such as Dwaraknath Tagore, Rustomji Kawasji, all these people also criticized the lack of proper hygiene and sanitation in the Indian section of the society for the spread of these kinds of diseases. So we do not know if it is true or not, but anyway, they considered the lack of proper hygiene as the cause for the spread of these diseases. Okay, so frequent fires also led to stringent building regulations. Often the poor people's houses are made of thatched roofs and all, right? I mean, the leaves of various trees are put together to make the roof. Clear? So these houses were extremely prone to fires, catching fires. Okay, so Britishers were very much fed up with these kinds of fires and they wanted to stop it all of a sudden. So they promulgated a law based on which from now onwards, nobody can build a house with a thatched roof. They have to build houses with tiled roofs. Roof tiles are must for any constructions that are happening. Okay, so such stringent laws were made by Britain. So all in all, the government took over all the initiatives of town planning, including the funding. So basically, every aspect of town planning was determined single-handedly by Britain. They commanded, everybody had to obey. They were not going to ask anyone else's opinion. If they evicted you, you have to go out. If they destroyed your house, there is no choice but to leave to some other place. That's all. That was the condition. Okay, so the racial divide of the white town and the black town was now reinforced by healthy and unhealthy. Earlier it was a racial divide based on economical status and the color of the skin. But now the term white town began to be identified with healthy area and the term black town began to be identified with unhealthy area. See, so everything that is positive is associated with Britain, which means everything that is positive is associated with the European culture, while everything that is negative is associated with the traditional Indian culture. So this is how British is bringing in this picture that Indians are by birth uncivilized. Okay, unhygienic, uncivilized, uneducated, illiterate. Clear? They considered European society as much more civilized and superior to the native Indians. Fine. Now, when all these things were happening, Indians did not stay out silent. Okay, I mean, some sections of the society actually brought in people and they started protesting against all these things. Okay, they started protesting against the colonial activities. They wanted anti-colonialism to take place, and you know that eventually all these will start. These kinds of protests will start to get more and more sophisticated, more and more organized, and once national leaders started appearing, it will become much more forceful. Okay, later on, by the establishment of certain societies and especially Indian National Congress, what will happen? The nationalistic movement will begin. People like Mahatma Gandhi will appear, and you know what? You know the rest of the story. Okay, we will look into that later in the coming sessions. But let's move on to the next section now. Architecture in Bombay. We spoke about Calcutta. Now we have to speak about Bombay. Okay, the today's quiz, I will reduce the number of questions. There will not be 50. Oh, there is 50 questions. Sorry about that. So I will take this a bit quickly. Okay, I think this is the last session. Let me just check it. Yeah, okay, just a few more slides. So within 5 minutes delay, I will begin the quiz. Okay. So architecture in Bombay. Bombay is very famous for beautiful buildings. Correct. I mean, most of them are British buildings, but we have to give it to them. I mean, their architecture was really amazing. Anybody who has seen Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus knows that it is a marvel of an architecture. Correct. So there were many monumental buildings, forts, government offices, educational buildings, etc., etc. They were constructed by British, meant to represent ideas of imperial power, nationalism, and religious glory. They did not construct these buildings out of their love for architecture. They did this to give out a message. They constructed such huge, humongous buildings to show that they are mighty imperial power, to show their nationalism. They did not construct these buildings in Indian methods of architecture. They did not use the Dravida style or Nagara style to construct these buildings. They used the European styles, the Neo-Gothic style, the Neo-Saracenic style. Okay, so they wanted to show their nationalism. They wanted to show religious glory. The Neo-Gothic style is associated with the British Church. Okay, Christianity. Gothic style is very much associated with Christianity. So they wanted to show their religious glory. They could have as well constructed it in the method of an Indian temple, but they did not do it. Okay, similarly, Bombay was initially 7 islands. Once the population grew, it began to become extremely crowded. So they annexed all these islands together, and more space was artificially created, and that is how Bombay became a single area. Initially, it was different 7 islands. Okay, it was brought in together by adding more land into it, by consolidating more land over Bombay, because the population was rising in a very high pace. And Bombay eventually became the commercial capital of colonial India. Opium trade towards China was mostly conducted from Bombay port only. Okay, opium was a very much demand product in China. So it was sent from India, mostly from Bombay and Calcutta ports. Okay, so Indian merchants also acted as middlemen for the purpose. For example, why? I mean, Indian middlemen acted as intermediaries. Why? Because although the Bombay and Calcutta ports were the chief terminals for this opium trade, opium was grown within India. I mean, inside the landlocked areas of India. So they have to bring this opium from those areas to the ports. Opium was more grown in Rajasthan. Rajasthan do not have access to sea. Okay, so Indian middlemen took the contract for bringing the opium from Rajasthan to here. Also took the contract for bringing more land under opium cultivation, and thereby they earned more and more profit. Okay, so here we can see the growth of Indian capitalist class. This is how Indian middle class eventually goes up into the next level and become the capitalist class. We will see that more Indians start to set up more and more factories, and once the World War I sets in, Indian factories will start earning a lot of profit, and it eventually leads to industrialization in India as well. Okay, so in the previous sessions, I think I have mentioned this. American Civil War happened in 1861. Until this point of time, the most important area from where Britain imported cotton was America. But during the time of American Civil War, cotton export from America declined by a huge quantity. British merchants and British industrialists wanted more and more cotton. So they asked East India Company to look into the possibilities of getting cotton from India. Indian lands was very much favorable for cotton because India has something known as the Deccan Trap. Black soil is very much available, which is very much good for cotton cultivation. Okay, so India became the major source of cotton, raw cotton exports to Britain. So this trade, which boomed around this time, also known as the cotton boom, was very much used by the Indian merchants also to gain a lot of income and profit. Okay, so finally in 1869, the Suez Canal was also opened. I think you know where the Suez Canal is situated. Opening of the Suez Canal reduced the travel time from Britain to India. Otherwise, they have to come all the way to the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southernmost point in Africa. They have to rotate it and then come to India. But now Europeans can come directly, completely bypassing South Africa. They can directly come to India using the Suez Canal. Okay, so this opening of this particular canal also had a huge impact on the major trading towns of India, especially Bombay. Okay, now the need to expand railways and shipping and develop the administrative structure. Already I explained this point earlier, so I am skipping it now. New architectural styles were usually European. Okay, so the Britishers wanted to create a familiar landscape. They did not want to be in a country where everything looked alien. Okay, they wanted to feel homely. Okay, for this purpose, most of the European constructions were in European styles. European styles would be best symbolized by their superiority, authority, and power. It will also help to mark out the difference and the distance between the colonial masters and the Indian subjects. Okay, so gradually, once the Europeans started building in their own style, Indians also started imitating them at least a bit. Okay, so Indians also, this obviously will happen. Some kind of cultural mingling will happen. So just like Indians imitated the European style of architecture, Europeans also imitated the Indian style of architecture. Okay, so we see some kind of overlapping between both these cultures, which will lead to the evolution of something known as the Indo-Saracenic architecture. Okay, we will see about that. Just wait. There are three kinds of architectures that we are going to look at. Number one is the Neo-Gothic style. Then we have Neo-Classical style. And finally, we have Indo-Saracenic architecture. Indo-Saracenic architecture is the result of intermingling of European and Indian methods of architecture. Okay, so gradually Indians too used the European architecture and made it their own. British in turn adopted some of the Indian features. For example, Bangla. Bangla is basically a thatched traditional hut in the Bengali region. So this construction of Bangla ensured privacy and marked a distance from the Indian world around them. Bangla was constructed in such a way, British people constructed it in such a way that it was very much distant from the rest of the Indian population. So it ensured privacy. Also, pitched roof and surrounding veranda kept the bungalow cool in the summer. Okay, if you use a flat roof, then what will happen? More heat will come inside the house. So if you go for something like, if the roof is much more conical, this will reduce the heat by a very lot. Okay, also rather than constructing low roofs, they constructed tall roofs. So the height of a single room will be extremely high. Okay, rather than a traditional house like this, they will construct rooms like this, more height, which means less heat will dissipate down. Fine. So similarly, such certain features were taken from or adapted from Indian society, Indian methods of construction. For public buildings, three broad architectural styles were used. Number one is Neoclassical. So here, construction of geometrical structures fronted with lofty pillars. Okay, geometrical structures, lofty pillars. I will show you an example, don't worry. Typical buildings include Town Hall of Bombay, Elphinstone Circle, which came to be known as Horniman Circle, etc., which were inspired by Italian model. Just look at this, okay? Neoclassical style, geometrical structures you can see. This one, for example, the Town Hall of Bombay. So, Town Hall of Bombay, this building is the best example for neoclassical style. Similarly, Elphinstone Circle, another beautiful example of the neoclassical style. Look at that. You can see many geometric patterns in all these buildings. Okay, these two, 1 and 2. Second form of architecture is known as Neo-Gothic style. Here you can see high-pitched roofs, pointed arches and detailed decorations. Just like the roofs of churches and all. Okay, medieval churches and all, you can see such buildings, right? Tall, Harry Potter movies you have seen. Hogwarts Castle is basically built in the Neo-Gothic style. Okay, just look at this. The Secretariat and University, the Bombay Secretariat, look at this. This will resemble a bit towards the Hogwarts Castle in Harry Potter. Correct? Look at this Victoria Terminus, again, Neo-Gothic style. Okay, so Victoria Terminus is a very famous railway station in Mumbai. This was also constructed in similar methods, similar fashion. Okay, so the University Hall was made with the money donated by Sir Kawasji Jahangir. Okay, so names are not much important, but understand that most of these buildings were also constructed with investments from Indians. Okay, Indians actually considered this as a profitable investment. European styles of architecture, European methods of working. They thought that this will, mean more social status. This would mean that they are much more civilized and better positioned in society. So Indian industrialists also invested in these kinds of buildings. Victoria Terminus example. So the third type of architecture is Indo-Saracenic architecture. In the Indo-Saracenic architecture, the Indo is basically the shorthand of Hindu, and Saracen was basically the term used by Europeans to identify Muslims. So basically this is a Hindu-Muslim kind of architectural style, Indo-Saracenic. Okay, so the inspiration of this style of buildings was actually taken from the domes and arches, the chhatris, the jalis, etc. etc. You know about this, right? The domes, the arches which are seen in Indian temples, the Muslim mosques, etc. etc. So you can see some examples here. Look at this, the Madras Law Court. You can see the Municipal Corporation building. Here all you can see the domes, right? There are beautiful domes here which have chhatris and these harmiga kind of thing on top. Okay, so this is known as Indo-Saracenic type of architecture. This was also employed by Britain. Very recent example is the Taj Mahal Hotel built by Jamshedji Tata. You know about the Mumbai Taj, right? This hotel is actually built in Indo-Saracenic kind of architecture. That famous terrorist attack happened in this hotel. You know about all the events. This is also in the Indo-Saracenic method of construction. Okay, so the lack of space in the city and the crowding of the people led to a new type of building known as chawl. C-H-A-W-L. You can see a chawl here. Bombay is an extremely crowded city. Too much population. Okay, so there is not enough space in the city to construct individual houses. So what did the people do? People went into constructing, clusters of houses. This is known as chawl. In a chawl, there is a building around a common space, and one family will be living in one apartment, like the modern day flats, except that it is a one-room apartment. Most of the Bombay apartments are one-room apartments. This is where poor people, common man in Bombay lives. Okay, so such kinds of buildings came up around this time when people cannot afford to buy land or afford to build houses of their own. Okay, so the formation of such houses also caused intermingling of various sections of the society, which eventually led to a development of new culture. So different sections of the society, different families started to live in adjacent doors. Okay, so they will talk with each other, they will mingle with each other. This will lead to the evolution of a new culture. Okay, so these architectural styles also influenced Indian culture, Indian society, Indian economy, etc. etc. Now the final slide for the day. What buildings and architectural styles tell us? Okay, what do they tell us? I will start the quiz just in a moment, okay? This is the last slide. I will start the quiz straight away, don't worry. So, aesthetic ideals prevalent at that time. So these buildings tells us what was the sense of beauty according to these people in the middle 19th century or middle 20th century. It will also tells us the vision of those who built them. What were they, how were they envisioning the outcome of these buildings? Okay, they wanted to show their dominance. They wanted to show their power, authority. Okay, they wanted to show their superiority over Indians. So these were the visions of Europeans who built this. How power was conceived of and how it was expressed through the structures and their attributes. Already told you. Such monuments, such high funda monuments rather than the poor peasant huts or makeshift houses. Okay, they wanted to show their imperial might. They molded tastes, popularized styles and shape and contours of the culture. So basically, these kinds of architectural buildings eventually molded the tastes, popularized different styles and shapes and contours of Indian culture. Okay, so many Indians came to regard European styles of architecture as symbols of modernity and civilization. This obviously will happen. Such aesthetically pleasing buildings, such monumental buildings, this will eventually have a, impact on the local population also. So some people, Indian people actually thought these buildings as symbols of European civilization. Okay, for example, if you remember, there was Colosseum that was built in ancient Rome. Colosseum was a place where gladiators used to fight, and gladiators used to fight each other, and one of them is actually killed. Right? So basically, what's happening in this Colosseum is savagery. True? But even then, people used to look at this Colosseum and be proud about it. Why? Because this is such a monumental building, such a prideful building. Although what is happening inside it is very much uncivilized. Okay, so here also the same thing happened. Once Europeans came up with these superb buildings, many of the Indians actually began to believe or began to think these buildings as symbols of modernity. But some other sections of this Indian society, considered this as an attack onto Indian culture. They believed in Indian traditional styles. They wanted to preserve that styles as such. So they thought this as an encroachment or invasion into the Indian systems. Okay, so all in all, we can conclude that these styles changed and developed through wider process of cultural conflict. So based on various cultural interminglings between Indians, Europeans, Britishers, Portuguese, etc., eventually these came together and new cultures emerged from all these things. This eventually had their impact on society, on economical factors, on religious factors, on class factors. Okay, so all in all, it influenced all fields of Indian society. That is the conclusion of this chapter. Okay, so that is it. We have reached the end of this chapter. Today we have seen how Britishers came to India, how they colonized India, how they slowly started taking control of each and every territory, Bombay, Calcutta and Madras in particular. We saw how architectural styles of Britain influenced Indians and vice versa, how the Indian middle class was born. Okay, so that's it. I think you have at least some idea about everything that I have talked to you about today. Tomorrow we will see the next session. I think it is national movement. Okay, chapter 4 of your NCERT part 3 textbook. I think it is the national movement. Very important topic. We will look into that tomorrow. So today the theory session is over. Let's look at the quiz session. And the quiz code for today is, one second, quiz code for today is not this, 020879. And the topic is ancient India. Okay, thank you, Seema. Okay, one more thing. I have 8 p.m. session at Unacademy app. 8 p.m. session. There also quiz is happening. Topic is medieval India. 1 hour session. Please do join me there also. The link is given in my Telegram channel. Okay. So please join the quiz. I will start the quiz in 2 minutes. Already 5 people have joined. I will start the quiz very soon. Guys, remember, please join the quiz using Unacademy learning app. You will not be able to read the questions very well in YouTube screen. Even if you do, the detailed explanation of answers is provided in the app only. Okay, so only the participants via the Unacademy learning app will get the detailed explanation of answers. Okay. So yeah, I am starting the quiz. So first question is on the board. With reference to the history of ancient India, which of the following statements is incorrect about Prashastis? A. Prashastis contain details which may not necessarily be true. Prashastis were composed by learned Brahmins. Prayag Prashasti written in Sanskrit belongs to Chandragupta I. None of the above. You have 40 seconds for each question. Oh, one each went for all the answers. Okay, Srisandra Devi got it right. Very good. Second question. Which of the following statements is or are correct with respect to ancient Indian text Shilapadigara? 1. It is a Tamil text that belongs to the Sangam period and credited to Chittalai Chattanar. 2. The epic revolves around the lives of Kovalan, Madhavi and Kannagi. Select the correct answer. Regarding Shilapadigaram, select the correct answer. Okay, the detailed answers will be given at the end of this quiz in the app itself. Please make sure to join this quiz using Unacademy learning app. Question number 3 is on the board. Medieval Indian state and the present region. You have to tell me which of these are correctly matched. 1. Champaka, Central India. Durgara, Jammu and Kashmir. Kuluta, Malabar. Choose the correctly matched pair. Okay. All right. So Naveen still leading the quiz. Saubhagya second place. Seema Sethi third place. Question 4. Consider the following statements. The materialistic philosophy propounded by Charvaka came to be known as Lokayata. 2. Charvaka school denies the existence of God. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Hello Alisha. We have completed today's theory classes, okay? The 12th standard NCERT textbook for today, the theories portion is completed. Now, in all my classes, the second part of my session is a quiz. And that is did via Unacademy learning app. Okay, so that is going on right now. So you can also join the quiz. The instructions is given in the screen here. Question number 5. The term menhir, sometimes seen in the news, is in the context of dash. An interstellar objects that pass through the solar system, upright monumental stone erected in the prehistoric times, form of plastic pollution in the oceans, a new drug developed for Alzheimer's disease. Easy question. %80 of you got that right. Menhir. Sixth question. Consider the following statements. Deification of the Buddha, treading the path of Bodhisattvas, image worship and rituals. Which of the above is or are the feature or features of Mahayana Buddhism? Direct question, very simple question. Let's see how many get this. Yeah, very good. Seema Shetty leading the quiz right now. Sri Sandhil Devi second place, Naveen third place. Question 7. With reference to the Vaisheshika school of thought, consider the following statements. The school propounded the atom theory and applied it to explain the formation of an object. It neither believes in both souls nor in transmigration. Select the correct answer. Easy question, I think. Alright, 50% of you going for option A. Good. Question number 8 is coming up. Consider the following pairs. Suranga Bhavadi, Kare's water system. Bhavana, Persian wheel used in irrigation. Mill, Sikh religion. Aragata, mythology based theatrical performance. Which of the above are correctly matched? Very easy question. Option C is the correct answer. Okay, 1 and 3. 50% getting it. Sri Sandhil Devi moving into first position. Ninth question. The term Prashasti in ancient Indian history refers to what? The official who was responsible for revenue collection, a special kind of inscription written to praise the ruler, commander-in-chief of Mauryan Empire, a form of bonded labor present in ancient times. So what exactly is a Prashasti according to ancient India? This is the 9th question. We have 50 more questions to go. Kindly participate in this quiz. The instructions are given in the PowerPoint presentation. Open the Unacademy Learning app. Under the test tab, hit the join quiz button and provide the code 020879. Yes, very good. Sri Sandhil Devi still at the top. Question 10. With reference to the culture of Rigvedic and later Vedic period, which of the following statements is or are correct? 1. Child marriage was a common feature of the later Vedic period, just like widow remarriage was prevalent in the Rigvedic age. 2. Punch mark coins of silver came to be used in later Vedic period, while the Rigvedic people used cows as a medium of exchange. 3. The king maintained a standing army in the later Vedic age, while early Aryans maintained tribal units. Choose the correct answer. Tenth question going on. We have 50 questions in total. Majority going for option C there. Very good. You will get the complete answers with detailed explanations at the end of this quiz in the Unacademy Learning app itself. So I request all of you to participate using the app. Question 11. Thinai concept during the Sangam age is related to which of the following? Thinai concept. Ecological zones, administrative divisions, water conservation, none of the above. Thin eye concept. Yeah, time is up. Correct answer? Yes. Very good. Majority of you got that right. 12th question. With reference to the Gupta period, consider the following statements. 1. In the Gupta period, Bhagavatism or Vaishnavism overshadowed Mahayana Buddhism. 2. Nalanda became a center of Buddhist education. 3. In this period, land taxes decreased in the number and those on trade and commerce increased. Select the correct answer. Dear learners who are watching this quiz using the YouTube application, kindly switch over to Unacademy Learning app and participate in this quiz directly. Okay, the instructions are given in the PowerPoint presentation shown here. Please go through them and join the quiz. Only those participants who participate using the Unacademy Learning app will get the detailed answer with explanation at the end of this quiz. Okay, because it is given in the app only. Question number 13. Consider the following statements about Amaravati School of Sculpture. 1. It was heavily influenced by Persian and Greek schools of art. 2. The art had a great influence on art in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. 3. It was patronized by Shatavahana rulers. Choose the correct answer. Amaravati School of Art. Let's see. Time is up. Yeah. Naveen moving into second place there. 14th question. Consider the following statements. 1. In the 14th century AD, 2 Ashokan pillar inscriptions were found by Firoz Shah Tughlaq, one in Meerut and other one at a place called Topra in Haryana. 2. The Ashokan inscriptions discovered by the British in 18th century were first deciphered by F. Max Muller. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Easy question. Very easy question. Option A is the correct answer. 40% getting it. Question number 15 is on the board. The major rock edicts of Ashoka mention the features of Dhamma. Which of the following rock edict features prohibition of animal sacrifices and festivities? Okay. Major Rock Edict 12, Major Rock Edict 9, Major Rock Edict 1, Major Rock Edict 8. Seconds remaining. Yeah, time's up. 60% of you going for option D. Okay. Yeah. Question 16. Consider the following statements. The Hathikumba inscription in Prakrit in the Udayagiri hills of Orissa records the achievement of Shaka ruler of Ujjain, Rudradaman I. 2. The Junagadh rock inscriptions of Chedi ruler of Kalinga describes the achievement of King Kharavela. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Dear learners who are watching this quiz in YouTube, kindly switch over to Unacademy Learning app and participate in this quiz directly. How to participate? The instruction is given in the PowerPoint presentation which is shown here. Please follow the steps. Karishma has joined. Question 17. Who among the following is solar deity to whom the famous Gayatri mantra is attributed to in the third mandala of Rigveda? Okay, so the famous Gayatri mantra is attributed to which among the following deity? Rudra, Savitri, Surya, Aditi. Five seconds remaining. Yeah, correct answer is Savitri. Okay, 50% of you getting the correct answer. Very good. It is not Surya, it is Savitri. Srisindal Devi crossing the 1000 mark there. Naveen crossing 500. 18th question. Which of the following are heterodox schools of Indian philosophy? 1. Sankhya, 2. Vaisheshika, 3. Purva Mimamsa. Sankhya, Vaisheshika, Purva Mimamsa. Which of these are the heterodox schools of Indian philosophy? So there are orthodox schools and heterodox schools. Orthodox schools are very much aligned with Vedas. Heterodox schools do not align themselves with Vedas. Correct. So time is up. Correct answer is none of the above. Okay. Heterodox schools are basically Charvaka school, Lokayata school, etc. etc. Yeah, 66% of you getting it right. Option D. Question number 19. The institution of Samanta finds mention for the first time in epigraphs of northern India dating to the 6th century. It is most closely associated with the origin and growth of which of the systems in India? A. Feudalism, B. Bonded labor, C. State ownership of land, D. Standing army system. Samanta. Yeah, it is feudal system. Question 20. Arrange the following events in chronological order. 1. Decipherment of Ashokan Brahmi script by James Prinsep. The founding of the Asiatic Society in Bengal. Macaulay's Minute. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. Okay, arrange these three events chronologically. Decipherment of Ashokan Brahmi script by James Prinsep. Founding of Asiatic Society of Bengal. And Macaulay's Minute. Dear learners who are in YouTube, kindly join this quiz. How to join this quiz? It is written in the PowerPoint presentation here. Please follow the steps and join the quiz. So Srisindal Devi is still leading. Naveen second, Seema third. 21. Which of the following is not the chief food crop of Harappan people? Okay, which of the following is not the chief food crop of Harappan people? Option A, wheat. Option B, rice. Option C, barley. Option D, sesame. Time is up. Yeah. Correct answer is rice. Yeah. Oh, it is a almost divided answer there. So 1/3 of you got it right. Question number 22. The Jain philosophy holds that the world is created and maintained by dash. Universal law, universal truth, universal faith, universal soul. According to Jainism, the world is created and maintained by which among the following? Universal law, universal truth, universal faith, universal soul. Time is up. Okay, now Seema Setti moving, Saubhagya moving to the 4th place. 23. Consider the following statements regarding Chalcolithic period. 1. Chalcolithic communities used copper as well as bronze. 2. People of this period mostly lived in the proximity of rivers and hills. 3. Use of stone tools was given up in this period. Choose the correct answer. Question number. Next question coming up. 24. Consider the following statements regarding Harappan civilization. 1. Same size bricks were used by Harappans in different cities. Tholavira was the only town where the town was divided into 3 parts. Indus Valley people are referred to as Meluha. Mohenjo-daro is called the Manchester of Indus Valley. Select the correct answer. Twenty-fourth question. Time is up. Okay, so still we have top 3 unchanged. 25th question. So we are halfway into the quiz. The Allahabad Pillar inscription is associated with which of the following? 1. Option A, Mahabatmananda. Option B, Chandragupta Maurya. Option C, Ashoka. Option D, Samudragupta. Those who are watching via YouTube, kindly do participate in this quiz. The instructions are given here. Download the Unacademy Learning app, click the plus button, click the test tab, hit the join quiz button and enter the code 020879. Hello Lucky, please participate in this quiz using the Unacademy Learning app. Okay, 25 answer is wrong, it is actually Samudragupta. Okay, Allahabad Pillar inscription deals with Samudragupta. Ashoka has made some inscriptions at the beginning, but the most correct answer is Samudragupta. Prayaga Prashasti. Question number 26. Consider the following pairs of dynasties and regions they belong to. 1. Gurjara Pratharas, North India. Palas, Eastern India. Rashtrakutas, South India. Which of the pairs given above is or are correctly matched? Those participants who participate in this quiz using Unacademy Learning app, at the end of this quiz they will get a detailed answer key with explanation in the app itself. Question number 26 going on. Yeah, time is up. Correct answer to that question is option C. Okay, many of you got that wrong. It's fine. The Sangams flourished under the royal patronage of which of the following dynasties? Option A, Cheras. B, Cholas. C, Pandyas. D, Chalukyas. Sangams flourished under which of the following South Indian kingdoms? Cheras, Cholas, Pandyas, Chalukyas. Easy question, I think. Yeah, I think many of you will get this right. Yeah, correct answer is Pandyas. Okay. PDF is not available. Okay. 90s kid. Actually, for my quizzes that I conduct as a part of my session in the in the PPTs, for that PDFs are available. But for those quizzes that are conducted using the Unacademy learning app, PDFs are not available. Answers are given in the app only. Detailed explanation is given in the app itself. Question 28. Consider the following statements regarding Kingdom of Magadha. 1. Bimbisara, Ajatashatru, Mahabhatmananda and Ashoka belong to the Magadha kingdom. 2. Initially, Rajagriha was the capital of Magadha, and in the 6th century BCE, the capital was shifted to Pataliputra. Class PDF is available. Class PDF is available. You can download it from my Telegram channel. I will show you the Telegram channel. This is it. Okay, t.me/msrw1. That is my Telegram channel. Subscribe to that. You can get the PDFs. Question 29. The source to reconstruct the history of Gupta period include dash. 1. Literacy. 2. Epigraphical sources. 3. Numismatic sources. Very simple question. Very basic question. Gupta period can be reconstructed using which of the following resources? Yeah, time is up. All the above, okay? Yeah. 30th question. Maghalmari, a Buddhist monastic site of the early medieval period, is located in the state of dash. Okay, Maghalmari. Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal. Maghalmari is located where? Last 5 seconds. Time is up. Okay, the answers along with the detailed explanation will be provided by the app itself at the end of this quiz. So I request all of you to join the quiz. How to join this quiz? The instructions are shown here. Download the Unacademy learning app. Click the plus button from the menu. Click the test tab below the screen. Click the join quiz button and provide the code 020879. This is absolutely free. Anyone can participate. Question 31. With respect to prehistoric age, which of the following pairs is or are correctly matched? 1. Paleolithic phase. Microliths are stools. 2. Mesolithic phase. Presence of a large number of rock paintings. 3. Neolithic phase. Beginning of settled agricultural practices. Alright. Question number 32. Consider the following statements. Bimbisara was a contemporary of both Vardhamana Mahavira and Gautama Buddha. 2. Buddhists and Jainists both claimed that Ajatashatru was a follower of their religion. 3. King Kalashoka was instrumental in convening the first Buddhist council at Rajagriha. Choose the correct answer. Easy question. Easy question. 32. Time is up. How many of you got that right? Correct answer is 1 and 2 only, okay? Okay, many of you got that right. Very good. So Sri Sandaldevi is still leading the quiz with 1600 points. 33rd question. In which of the following languages the ancient Tripitakas are written? Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Aramic. Very easy, very easy. Tripitakas are written in which of the following languages? Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Aramic. Five seconds to go. Yeah, time's up. Pali language, okay. 34. Consider the following statements. Copper was the first metal to be used by man for making tools. 2. The Harappan civilization belongs to the Chalcolithic period. 3. Gold, copper, silver, iron and bronze metals were known to Indus Valley civilization. Very simple question. Please don't get it wrong. Very easy question, very easy. Yeah, time is up. Correct answer is option C, 1 and 2 only. There is iron is not familiar for Indus Valley people. Okay, many got that wrong. Why? 35. Which of the following orthodox schools of Indian philosophy believes in the physicality of universe? A. Samkhya, B. Vaisheshika, C. Nyaya, D. Mimamsa. Philosophical schools of India is very important for UPSC. Please study them. So, physicality of universe is a characteristic of which of the following philosophical schools? Samkhya, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Mimamsa. Yeah, time is up. So, a lot of you going for option A there. Good. Naveen also crossing 1000 mark there. Question 36. Emperor Ashoka has been referred to with many other names such as Devanam Priya and Priyadarshi. Which of the following was the first edict that referred to him by the name Ashoka? Option A. Kalsi inscription. Option B. Mahruli inscription. Option C. Maski inscription. Option D. Hatikumpha inscription. So which of these inscriptions use the name Ashoka for the first time? Maski edict is the correct answer. Question number 37. Consider the following pairs of novels and their authors. 1. Tolkapiyam, Tolkapiyar. Silappatikaram, Ilangodigal. Manimekhalai, Sittalai Satna. Which of the above pairs is or are correctly matched? Another simple question. Time is up. All are correct, okay? Seema Setti also crossing 1000. 38. Consider the following dynasties that ruled Magadha Mahajanabada. 1. Shishunaga dynasty. 2. Haryanka dynasty. 3. Nanda dynasty. Arrange the dynasties in correct chronological order according to the rule of Magadha. Shishunaga, Haryanka, Nanda. Okay, Ashu Tandon has joined. 39. Consider the following statements regarding Sohagaura copper plate inscription. 1. It is written in Prakrit with Brahmi script. 2. It is the oldest known inscription. 3. It mentions about the expeditions led by Ashoka. Select the correct statement. Okay. 40th question. Consider the following statements regarding Nalanda Mahavira. 1. Nalanda Mahavira was founded by Kumaragupta I of the Gupta dynasty in 5th century CE. 2. The renowned Chinese traveler Huansang, who came to India during the rule of Chandragupta, studied at Nalanda Mahavira. Choose the correct answer. Next question. Coming up. 83% of you going for option C there. 41. Consider the following statements regarding the three prominent schools of sculpture of ancient India. 1. Gandhara school was influenced by Greek and Roman rulers, whereas Mathura school was influenced by Iranian rulers. 2. Gandhara sculptures used British grey sandstone, whereas Mathura sculptures used white marble. 3. Mathura school was patronized by Kushana rulers, whereas Amaravati school was patronized by Shatavahana rulers. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Time is up. 42. Arrange the following dynasties in the correct chronological order of their arrival in the post-Mauryan period. 1. Shakas, 2. Indo-Greeks, 3. Parthians, 4. Kushans. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. You have to arrange them in the chronological order of their arrival in the post-Mauryan period. Okay. 42nd question. We have 8 more questions. Time is up. Yeah, time is up. Correct answer to that question. How many got? All of you going for option B. Fine. Srisnil Devi crossing the 2000 mark there. 43rd question is on the board. Ashokan inscriptions of Manshera and Shabasgarhi are written in which of the following languages? Prakrit and Kharoshti, Prakrit and Brahmi, Aramic and Brahmi, Aramic and Kharoshti. Manshera and Shabasgarhi inscriptions. Which language and which script? That is the question. Prakrit language Kharoshti script, Prakrit language Brahmi script, Aramic language Brahmi script, Aramic language Kharoshti script. Time is up. Yeah, 40% of you going for B and 40% of you going for C. Interesting. 44th question is already on the board. Consider the following statements about Sabhas and Samitis during the Vedic period. 1. Sabhavati were the women who attended the Sabhas. 2. Samiti was more in the nature of a folk assembly. 3. Samiti was responsible for judicial functions whereas sabhas was not. Which of the above statements is or are not correct? Not correct, okay. Okay, many of you got that wrong. 45. Why were women considered as an important resource in agrarian society in ancient India? 1. Women were child bearers in an agrarian society which was dependent on labor. 2. Many aspects of production, such as kneading clay for pottery, depend on female labor. Choose the correct answer. Question number 45. All the answers will be given to you in written form along with detailed explanations at the end of this quiz in the Unacademy learning app itself. So please join this quiz even now and you will get the entire quiz package. The instructions on how to join is given in the PDF, in the PPT shown here. So next question, 46. Consider the following statements regarding Harappan civilization. The Indus people were probably the first to produce cotton in the world. 2. There was no metallic money in circulation and trade was carried through the barter system. Select the correct answer. Yeah. Time is up. Next question, 47. The word Yavana was used to refer which among the following? Option A. Greeks and other people who entered the Indian subcontinent. B. Prisoners sentenced for seditious acts. C. Messengers who visited royal courts. D. Devadasis who performed for social service. Select the correct answer. 10 seconds remaining. Let's see how many get this right. Okay, time's up. Yavana, option A is the correct answer, okay? Question number 48. Consider the following statements. The Rigveda hymns were chanted when sacrifices were performed, where people prayed for religious purposes only. 2. Sacrifices such as Rajasuya and Ashwamedha were performed by chiefs and kings who depended on Brahmana priests to conduct the ritual. 3. Buddha questioned the authority of Vedas, whereas Mahavira maintained a neutral stand. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Easy question. Yeah, so many of you got that right. 49. Penultimate question. Which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the Samantas during medieval India? 1. They were the big landlords or warrior chiefs in different regions of the subcontinent. 2. The kings didn't approve them as their subordinates but considered them as rivals. 3. Rashtrakutas were initially the Samantas under the Chalukyas of Karnataka. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. Time is up. Now to the last question for the day. Okay, final question coming up. Here option C is the chosen answer. Last question. Meherga and Daujali Harding are important ancient sites in India. Which of the following is correct regarding these two sites? Okay, Meherga and Daujali Harding. Option A. At Meherga, in the present-day Balochistan, agriculture and settled life began much later to other sites. B. Daujali Harding is known for the discovery of several burial sites, with one instance showing the burial of a person with goats. C. Daujali Harding is an important site that developed on the banks of river Narmada. D. Daujali Harding is an important Neolithic site. So that is the final question for the day. Time is up. Okay. So, yeah. Very important sites for Indus Valley civilization. Please do learn them in detail. So we have come to the end of the quiz. After 50 questions, today's winner is Risindal Devi with 2,363 points. Naveen second place with 1,771 points. Seema Shetty third place, 1,282 points. Karishma Badani also scored 1,000 plus mark. Very good. Congrats to all participants. Thank you for participating. Please be ready again with Unacademy app at my 8 p.m. session. That is a different kind of quiz. I mean, it will be taken in the session itself. I will be explaining each answer and all. 1 hour session at 8 p.m. Okay. So this session comes to an end here. Please use my code MSRW1 in order to get 10% off on Unacademy subscriptions. Also, please subscribe to my Telegram channel t.me/MSRW1 so that you can get all the class notes, PDFs, etc. etc. Okay. So that's it, guys. Thank you for joining. See you all again at 8 p.m. Until then, bye bye.